Overpass team. The other teachers, John, and then Ryan and Mike were our technologists. So, Overpass. Overpass is about game-based learning. It's designed to foster argumentation skills in high school age students. So all of us who are educators or thinking about education, which is us, know that the Common Core standards are a reality, and one of their major foci is argumentation, right? And that is one of many standards that deal with argumentation. Okay, argumentation. Well, if that's the standard, that's what we're going to be beholden to. Where are the kids at? And another hat that I wear besides a member of this team is I do assessments. I coordinate assessments in my school. So in the beginning of the year, we did an assessment. And this is just data from my school, right? So it's idiosyncratic in that way. But an assessment of reading and writing skills, only 30% of underclassmen were able to distinguish counterclaims from competing claims. And one of the largest deficits that I saw in my school then is that students couldn't write a paragraph sequentially that made sense. So those are two of the underlying issues that we identified and said, okay, what can we do about them? What can we do about them in a digital context? One of the cool things about a digital context is that, before, I would do little things in my classroom, like a paper matching, what's a counterclaim, what's good evidence, is this good evidence for this claim, whatever. Those of us who are teachers had made worksheets like this. But a digital context allows students to practice lots of times. The game hook adds for that little bit of engagement. As you'll see, and if you've maybe already seen, there's a burning truck, so that's always fun, right? But not only that, there's the back end of, if my students are making the same kind of mistakes, if they're making mistakes over and over again, because it's in a digital context, on that back end I can look and see, okay, people are having really hard time identifying counterclaims. People are having really hard time selecting the correct evidence. Whatever it is, the digital context allows me as a teacher to say, here's the problem, and now in my instruction, outside of the world of this game, I can tailor my instruction to help. So practice, and I can get deeper insight into what's going on in the student's head. So that said, we're going to walk through what we created to address those needs.
Cool. All right, thanks. All right, so I'm Ryan. I'm a technologist. I also teach at Parsons. So I'm just going to give a little demo. And really what's important is, and as all the groups have talked about, is testing was so important in the whole making process. Putting it in front of either each other and screaming and yelling at each other, or putting it in front of students gave us a lot of valuable information. So early in the process is that we realized a demo simulation was important in terms of learning what the mechanic was, what it is that we're trying to get them to understand, even just to know where to click. So I saw many of you trying this over at that table. So in general, the basic mechanic for this game is to identify where a particular post or type of information would go with particular text, right? So in this example, I would grab onto the supporting argument and match it, right? So this is one of those early demo, early stage, so that you kind of understand what the mechanic is. I can show you the burning truck really quickly, right? And part of what was important is also the feedback that we got from students in terms of testing is that they were like, can you make it blow up more, and I want more fire. Can you put body parts exactly? Right? So, but what was important was that we also found that the wind state didn't give enough. So, early stages for the wind, the truck will drive by and they're like, what just happened? I don't get it. So, I think if there's anything, and we'll get to that later, it's just about managing it. So, but because of the classes that our teachers work in, so the example I'm going to show is science, which was actually in John's class. Which, just to give a for instance, we were in a classroom with Bunsen burners on the tables, right, that just aren't hooked up to anything, and every student's got a MacBook Pro, And I just think visually to convey that how impactful that was, so that we're talking about science on MacBook Pros with Bunsen burners right next to us. So I'm going to show the climate change. And one element here that I think is important is the hints that we wanted to provide. A lot of the feedback that we got was, what if I'm stalled, or what if I don't know what to do? I think we'll talk about it later, which is things to embellish upon. But if you see these little tags here, these are just our initial prompt of like, what are we supposed to do? What am I doing here? What information should I be looking for? So, okay, so I'm going to try this in front of you guys to see if I'm doing this right. Okay, so, and I picked an easy one. So
some really hard ones.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to do the Black Death because that one's just brutal. That one's brutal. All right, so I'm reading through this one. I say, okay, climate change is happening because of pollution in the atmosphere caused by humans. Okay, that sounds like a main idea. And now I'm just going to work through each of these elements, right? So I'm going to say the polar ice melting off at record pace, okay, as a result of increased global temperatures. This is not good. This sounds dangerous, but it sounds like it supports my original claim.
And for those who can't see the red bits are saying main idea.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that. But like each of these posts have like a specific relationship to them. And I think that's really important, is demonstrating the relationship between different pieces of content. Right? So as I work through each of these, I'm just going to match each of these up, moving my conclusion over, and then I'm just going to, so I have success here. That's great. And we'll talk about it a little bit later about the reactions and responses to each of the students. But just to move back, just to talk a little bit about the levels that we work through. Just a little bit about it, not to get too technical about it, but just to kind of talk about how we were thinking about each of these. Is that what's important is that it's not information in isolation, and that, okay, I just did climate change, and the next thing I'm going to do is about Revolutionary War. We're envisioning this as being something that's a collection of subject matter that you're moving through, and then it actually is embedded within the subject matter that is being covered by a teacher. It's not something that's just done randomly just to learn about arguments. It's about learning in context the subject that you're covering. And also also tying in with game design, how each of the levels move through difficulty. So as you master the system, as you start to understand how to assemble things, you're actually learning about general game design mechanics. So this tied directly to the boards that we built out. The different kits that we assembled were done specifically. And as Shing mentioned earlier, I mean, this is the stuff that we're beating ourselves over the heads on, which was like, we have to get this right. Part of the experience is that scaffolded learning. Okay, and okay, so I talked about difficulty, but what I really want to talk about is also how that actually happens, and whether it was subject matter, whether it's the actual content or the text, the length of text, the complexity of the argument, as well as the number of arguments. There's a number of scenarios where there are multiple bridges that you're building with like or similar topics, but in different conclusions. I think that's really important.
That's the Black Death.
Right, that's the Black Death one. This is brutal. So, right, okay, and Mike is just going to talk a little bit about this part, which was, I've been talking about the student side of things. There's also the teacher side.
So if you want to make your own Black Death, curse your name for doing that. Here's how you would do it. Right, so like we said, there are kits, and there are actually, so for example, if you have, here's our sort of a system here, here's a bunch of kits that we have already set up. Here is the science kit. Within science kit, we give a description, actors who made it. And here are a bunch of our levels. Here's climate change, all the way on through here. And if you want to make a new level, you just type in a new level, and go on from there. When you want to edit a level itself, within a kit, here's the level from the demo. It's the demo kit. Kits. Give a name, give a description, which is the thing that pops up right at the beginning, so you can give a little description to your students. We set up our posts. So right now we have a main idea, supporting argument, counter-argument, conclusion. We could change this around if we wanted to and say, okay, well, I want this to be a counter-argument, and supporting argument to go in here. Just have a very different type of discussion. I can change different kind of posts. If I want to make it not necessarily an essay, but say a narrative, I can do that entirely on my own. And here are the planks that we have. So here's a supporting argument, here's a counter-argument, here's conclusion. They're in different orders. We can switch them around, make it really hard. And here's the concept. And that's pretty much it. If you want to add another plank, it's really easy. Here's a post-up. I'm going to add another supporting argument. Maybe it's a red herring. I can throw it in here. Say, it's
that's also important to note. It's like there might be scenarios where there's more information than is actually spaces available. So it's about making decisions about what actually is supporting the argument that you're building.
I also just wanted to emphasize, and I know a lot of people have questions over there about it, is, and you sort of said it, but I just want to emphasize that the post types, just as you can create different levels and different planks, you can create different kinds of posts. So we only created 3, 4, whatever number of posts so far, and that's what loaded in that little menu. But there's an editor where you can create a post for any kind of post that you would want. So it'd be who, what, when, or how, whatever.
Okay. Would you mind? My name is John Darian, and I'm a teacher at Brooklyn International High School. And we tested the Overpass with my students and also with Matt's students. My school is interesting because 100% of our kids are, coming in 9th grade, recently arrived immigrants to New York City. So in addition to teaching science, I'm also an ESL teacher. We did 2 tests in my school. First test was with 7 students after school, and I separated the students into 2 groups, one working through levels that were not as difficult as the other group was working through. And afterwards, we conducted an interview. And for the second test, a week later, was a full class during my second period, and the kids all went through the same levels, but the levels were specific to the content I had taught in class. Also, the kids had went through those 3 demos, the initial levels, to get them used to how to use Overpass. And afterwards, they went and did a survey, and we conducted an interview. Okay.
I teach 9th grade history, so I was giving a test the day that the test happened, so I had to do it after school. One of the things that happened is I had all the kids play all the intro levels, and then I assigned them different levels to test because I thought, you're receiving a test today, you're very tired, you probably don't want to stay and test this game for very long. But one of the interesting things was after the students finished their assigned level, a lot of them tried to do more levels or went back to the beginning and did all of them. So I thought that was something cool that emerged from my testing.
Yeah, I saw something similar as well. Okay, so this is during the second test, and students were, at the beginning, were being really careful before they started to move any of the planks. They were reading through them carefully, reading the hints, trying to just make sure that they knew the content, which was interesting to see happen. In this picture, we see that the student has connected all of the planks, the text, the evidence, to the different posts, the different parts of the argument. And before he presses the try it button, he's reading through all of how his organization, how he organizes. So he's checking his work. And it was something that we saw happen a lot. The kids didn't want to get that burning truck, so they were being very careful with how they placed the text. And in this picture, we see is at the end after the test, and students were doing the survey. And so the kids in the far right were going through the survey, but the student right up here, when she had already finished the survey and wanted to go back and complete that level that she didn't finish, the Black Death level. So we saw a lot of students actually after the survey going back and playing again because they didn't finish and they wanted to figure it out, what was the right assemblage.
And you had even mentioned to me, like there was a student that was sitting in the back over here, and he's like a student that you had mentioned is like traditionally, not focused or even engaging in most of the...
It's never really engages in the class, and like with all of the teachers. We have one-to-one computer student ratio, and he never even wants to get his computer. Like, he's just not engaged whatsoever with school. But with this, like, he was really involved. He wanted to play the game. I think it was the gaming aspect of it that got him really into it. And this picture here is a screenshot from the interview that Sheen did with the Test 1 students. And from this, from the student feedback that we got during this interview, from the surveys, we got a lot of really, really useful information regarding not only the design, but also the learning experience for them as well. And out of all of that feedback, we made changes from test 1 to test 2. We created those tutorial levels. We developed different types of hints that help students progress. Some of the suggestions that students had with design, like different settings, we were thinking about adding for future changes. And interesting that I saw was that students were using Google Translate simultaneously at my ESL students. So that might be something to keep in mind in future changes.
And they also had more questions about the survey afterwards than they did about the actual content when they were doing it, which I thought was really like for us, that was great to see. I mean, unfortunately, maybe we need to work on the survey.
I mean, it was pretty funny. So, for example, when the survey asked, were there any bugs? Like, they're literally looking for insects. Like, my students don't know what a bug is referring to in that context.
Meant they were really careful.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pretty funny. So, feedback overall about the learning experience is we found that it was really challenging for students, but that they enjoyed the challenge, the gaming challenge of it. Also, that the double bridge levels, like the Black Death level, was really difficult for students, and so finding ways to maybe figuring out what those hints would be like. And as well as they said that it helped them with the content that's related to class. Now, specific skill and content support, they said that helped them learn parts of the essay, helped them to organize evidence, be able to attach different pieces of evidence to different parts of the argument, as well as support the class content, helped them with outline development as well as essay writing.
So some of the outstanding questions we have based upon the test that we've done. Feedback. So we had made some changes based upon the first user test, providing more feedback, but what are some ways we can give even better feedback with more timely feedback, or feedback that's appropriate to the problem that the student's having? Same with formative assessment, how can we allow either the application or really the teacher to begin to assess student performance and mastery of the parts of the application that they're on at the moment it's happening, and then hopefully guide them to something that may be more useful for them. What kind of user data do we need to record to get this sort of stuff? So we can see when people win or lose, but do we want to know if they're hesitating, if they're shuffling things around, if they're pausing, what's their time on task? We have the ability to take all this data and should record it, and is it going to be useful for us? That's something we need to figure out. Can it be used outside the classroom? We've had this great experiences inside the classroom, but outside the classroom is a whole different beast. What's going to happen when you try to bring it home to a learning institution, what have you? How does that work there? We don't really know yet. Balancing the difficulty. So there's obviously a progression of difficulty. What's the right balance, and how can we help students sort of easily navigate the different possibilities there? And then for the educators, how can we make the creation of levels easier? A lot of what happened when we were sitting around working on this, we got a lot of really interesting feedback, just talking amongst ourselves about what we could do to make this better, and then we just sort of instantly changed it and tried to interact again. We found a lot of great stuff like that. So what else is out there that from the teachers we haven't tested with? We'd love to know. Sharing. We really want to be able to, we call these kits for a reason, because we want to be able to take kits and share them with other teachers. So if you have this great curriculum for history or for science, give it to your neighbor science teacher or science teacher across the world. We want that to be able to happen, and then that teacher be able to mod it, do their own thing, and share it again, and so forth. And finally, how can we provide teachers with the data they need from the experience, both in real time as it's happening, as well as in summary, to see how the students have performed on the levels that they created. Future iteration, just finding new ways to create feedback, providing feedback in the app from the educators themselves in the room or at a distance. Those students are involved in the test. Tracking student data in real time in the summary. What kind of data do we need? What's going to help teachers best teach the lessons they're involved in? And sharing everything else.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, any questions?
Cool.
Can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on having a game output data that teachers can use? Because I found in my research that it's an affordance of gaming that's really underutilized.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, part of it would be, all the metrics in terms of where they're making mistakes. I think Amanda touched on that a little bit, which is what type of content are they having issues with? You can refine that to a specific student, or even just overall in terms of the class. So it's like feedback to a teacher in terms of maybe it's an issue with the actual how much you covered in a specific topic.
So I think one of the advantages of this versus other ways of evaluating students in a formative way, like a quiz or just looking at their work, is like because the computer can chart exactly how they're doing it and when and all those different variables. I can get into their brains in ways that I can't normally, right? Because normally I say, okay, you made the mistake here, and I can sort of speculate, like, why is there a mistake? But if I see, like, the time that they're hesitating between two posts, or if I see whatever, that sort of looking into their mind data that I can get from here that I wouldn't necessarily be able to get on a quiz.
Yeah, it's a very different situation. You see, like, a student who's laid everything else out perfectly, but is waiting and looking at it and considering, versus someone who has it all messed up and is sort of quickly reordering things and trying again and just sort of trying to go through it.
Two kind of questions or thoughts. One is I wonder how you arrived at the truck driving across the bridge metaphor, and I do say that a little critically because I think you're really teaching kids about the nature of making an argument here and how arguments are attacked or say or whatnot in the real world. And I wonder if the real world application of making an argument is building a bridge as a truck is coming at you, or if it's building a building and then, I don't know, a gorilla comes and attacks it or something like that, and kind of how you came at that. And my second question or comment is that it seems like all these ideas are about the same thing in a really good way. And it seems like there's a real tie-in between Linky and this, which was kind of, have you thought about the next step, which is giving the kids the ability to make the building blocks themselves and put those building blocks together, kind of like like the summary version of Linky, and what your thoughts are about how you would take this to the next step, when they're not just testing but generating the argument.
That was actually, we went through several different prototypes in the paper phase that we were talking about earlier, and I think kind of the thought of this was that this is a nice place to sort of start with a larger sort of progression. It's a very sort of it's a heart of experience that can go like way back as far as being able to have students create their own planks and then be able to bring them.
Yeah, I mean the original idea was massive. I mean, like when we had actually scoped it out, it was like, okay, we need 3 years and $10 million of budget. It's like I think we tried to be super specific and narrow on purpose when we built this, so that we knew, okay, this is a sizable project in terms of the time constraints, as well as we know we're going to be able to get feedback on it when we actually get it from the students.
So, sorry. To your first point about the layout, also. So one of the other things, one of the big feedback pieces from the students that was awesome. There was a girl, one of my students, Yomari, I think it was, said that like this bridge, it's way too boy. She's like, this is guy stuff. What about girls, right? And so we talked. Yeah, she's like, the burning car, like I'm not into that. And so. One of the things that the students were really into was being able to like unlock different skins or different ways that experience can look. So that's definitely one of the places our minds are heading. It doesn't have to be a bridge. It doesn't have to be a truck.
Yeah, and I think that ties into the hackathon idea. And I think we even talked about it, is that there definitely was a lot more time spent on the architecture and all the underlying structure that was put in, the back end basically. That's where there's a lot of work, and to be honest, the front end was almost like a later piece.
But that's what you mean. As part of the architecture is that the back end and the front end are actually almost completely separate.
Yeah.
The front end just eats the data coming from the back end and happens to have a trouble.
And so part of the hackathon might be ways of re-envisioning how to use this information. I think the mechanic works. It's about how is it actually applied in a meaningful way.
In terms of the argument, did you guys think about transition sentences or transition arguments? Because I feel like there's a pretty large part of making an argument is how do you transition between supporting argument 1 and 2.
Yeah.
We even talked about the ways in which there are many different arguments and the way that can be laid out. Right now we're doing it in a very rudimentary way. There are so many other forms that we could explore.
Right. Yeah. One of our big concerns is that doing this privileges a very specific type of thinking and type of creating an argument, and that's not necessarily the only, certainly not the only, it's not necessarily the best, it's just a way that we have created a thing to do. But as we iterate this and develop it more, those are the kind of areas in which we wanted to develop the
Yeah, but I mean, with the back end piece of it, as a teacher, you have the ability to change what those different parts of an argument are, or it doesn't even have to be connected to an argument. It could be, like I did news scripts with my students about infectious diseases. It could be something that the teacher puts in that are the different parts of a news script that students are taking their research and connecting it to.
Yeah. Or someone mentioned earlier, like who would or why now.
Yes,
Right.
totally.
I'm interested in this back-end piece as a teacher. I don't want to, have you thought about the timing for teachers? Like, how much time am I going to really have to invest in going into the back-end? Do I have to know HTML, CSS, styling sheets, the whole idea of the plank, and there's a concern here that I want to use technology to make my life easier. So now the question arises, when I have this product, now I'm putting a lot of sentences, paragraphs, connecting it to the lesson plans, etc. What way can it be that I press 2 or 3 buttons and I already have something set up? I mean, does that make sense? Like creating data to the extent that as a teacher, all I gotta do is say I'm a login person and I can find whatever I need from you guys, but I don't know if that's going to be possible.
That's definitely the idea behind the kits. I mean, one of the things that we want to look for in the future is to take, if someone has prepared a really good set of science levels in this kit, that you can see, okay, well, I really like that kit. I'm going to take it, I'm going to modify one sentence, maybe not even that, and I'm ready to go. So you don't actually have to do anything if you just want to use the kit that's out there. And if you want to do everything else, you have the ability to do that or anything else. So if you want to make a few tweaks here and there, that's fine. You want to completely model it over, that's fine. You want to do nothing to it, that's fine. You don't actually have to do anything at all.
And I don't know if you noticed actually what Mike walked through, that wasn't any HTML. Those fill in the blanks that he was doing, that's constructing the planks. Like, so when he was entering words in there, it was actually constructing, instead of main argument or supporting argument, all you have to do is write in English. Like the content, again, no coding on the teacher side.
We do let you put HTML if you want to, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't require it.
I mean, you could even take research from students, like specific pieces of evidence that they've researched and put it in there and have them work through it.
You guys talked about in-app feedback. I felt like when I was playing around with it, that was the one piece that in this prototype was really missing, because I really wanted to know, oh, what am I doing wrong? And you mentioned that you were thinking about having like live teacher feedback as it's happening, or also just kind of AI or built-in little suggestions, hints, right? That's something you guys are...
Yeah, we were thinking about more AI-based feedback at this point. Whether it's time-based, a student is pausing for a long period of time, and you might receive a particular prompt. More in that direction.
It's also, I mean, you can imagine having a teacher computer as well, and you can see that student A is stalled out for 2 minutes, and that may be a prompt to go and look, and that's the kind of real-time feedback. That would be pretty straightforward technically to do if it's something that we wanted to do. But there's so many different ways to go, and so many kinds of feedback you provide that we're still really looking at.
Some of the hints that we were working with was like with the 2 bridges, identifying the 2 main arguments for them, so putting that right up there and establishing those 2 bridges. Another one was to identify the points that they had not organized correctly.
Right.
Right now those question marks inside each of the posts, the post types, the different parts of the main argument. The question mark, you click on it and it gives you information about what a main argument is, what a supporting argument is.
Right, because what I really felt like I needed was, oh, if I put something wrong and my truck crashed, am I just going to be guessing? As I get no feedback, so I really felt like, how do I learn, how to get better?
And that was actually one of the responses, a lot of the responses that we got from students. So I think the balance that we have as a lab is always, we're building so quickly.
Of course,
like it's in a month, and you know this.
Oh, yeah.
So the interesting thing that we are trying to be more deliberate about is how can you do this without coding too? So when we were saying modeling, it was literally like, what things do we actually build in, and what things is actually about the teaching practice and how you understand how to use the tool. So for example, like when I was with John in his classroom, it was literally John standing behind like 3 of the kids and saying, oh, this one is like moving ahead. These 3 have been staring at the screen for 10 minutes on the same level. Let me release a hint. and he like literally went up to them, and for each group of students, like I remember for one, he was like explaining the definition of main argument. For like the two over here, he was giving them, filling in the blank for one of them and letting them fill around. So I think it's a struggle, and I think that also helps us model, like before we build it, what seem to be the hints that work most well that can help us make this prototyping process as efficient as possible. I'm also doing this to segue that we have about 20 minutes left, so I wanted to open it up, not just also specifically to this group, but for generally, again, we appreciate, because we also wanted to just give a flavor, like all the questions you ask are the things we talk about in our lab sessions and have to like quickly push through, but want to talk about more. So we wanted to give you that flavor, but just like I wanted to enable the opportunity now. And then after that, if you guys want to still play with some stuff, I think they like